Welcome to another thrilling adventure with the Amazing Digital Circus! And today's adventure is... Wait, Kinger? Were you always able to make those? Oh, it's just a butterfly. Is it a butterfly? It's certainly not an arachnid. And Jax, did you always have access to everyone's rooms? Where did you get that key?
Oh, I'd blame Ragatha, but I've always had these keys. Matter of fact, I'll make one now.
And Zubul, shut up!
I didn't even say...
Shut up, Zubul! I have to get control. You know what? I'm going to take vacation. I'm going to take 5. That's what I do.
Caine? Are we really not having an adventure?
Yes, adventure canceled. Cut the credits.
What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Animated Cartoon Conspiracy Theory, where the only thing Caine doesn't have control over is our minds, our great minds. But today I wanted to do something a little different, where we're not only piecing together some old theories that we had before, but also makeshifting some new theories. Like, they all make sense in the grand scheme of things, but they all loosely fit by themselves. So in this video, we'll not only be recapping some of the older theories that we have on the Amazing Digital Circus, but inserting some new mini theories that we have as well, making this the Mega Mini Theory, where we basically come in and solve the Amazing Digital Circus as it currently stands. And if I'm being honest, I don't know how long this video is going to be. I'm currently recording in my closet, trapped in by Freddy Fazbear. But without a further ado, make sure you hit that subscribe button, that like button, and of course, if you're new here, that hype button. I don't know what it is, and I don't know what it does, but I'm interested to see what it does, because it's hype, it's cool, all the kids are talking about it. But without a further ado, let's solve the Amazing Digital Circus. The order of each of these theories are going to range from what is most likely happening to the most wild thing that could be possible. Starting with the exit theory. Now, a lot of you might be wondering, is there actually an exit inside of the digital circus? Well, I believe that the answer is yes. In the Amazing Digital Circus, Pomni enters in confused. She tries pulling off the headset, which everybody else tells her that they've already tried, and she asks Caine for an exit, and he says there isn't one. Only for him to then show Pomni around the whole circus, and then for her to see what looks like an exit within the grounds. But are any of these actually the exit, and is Caine lying for the sake of keeping us distracted? Now, then the thing about this is that this is one of our earliest theories on the Amazing Digital Circus. And the thing is, looking back at it now, after about 6 episodes, this kind of still stands on its 2 legs. And that's for the simple fact that these 2 doors are 2 separate colors. The door that Pomni tries to escape back into from the very beginning is a stark red. And when she tries to escape again through that door, it seemingly takes her through a maze of office rooms, only for her to end out back through the void, which confirms that this is a construct made by Caine for whatever reason. And thinking retroactively about it, we might see this again in a later episode, because that does mean that Caine created an exit. But what about the one that we saw on the ground? That door is a starkly different color. It's orange. And a lot of comments from that early theory suggested that it might have been the tint from the grass making it look orange, which is quite possible too, because if you take the color red and throw it inside of any color editing app and just use the tint function, turning it green will turn it orange. But the thing is that this door is already there. Caine didn't place it there, it was seemingly already there on its own. And if we look at the symbolism within the show, taking into account that CNA actually stands for Cain and Abel, now confirmed by episode 6, the exit might take more of a biblical meaning, where the door now represents the tree of knowledge. Now, while a lot of people haven't taken the time to read the Bible, in the very beginning of the world, there was the Garden of Eden. And in the very center was the tree of knowledge. And those that took from the fruit of the tree and ate it would not only gain the concept of good and evil, but will also understand what is technically good and bad. And if they ate from the tree, they would be banished from the Garden of Eden forever. And in a way, Pomni is the only one who has tasted this fruit. And she's the only one aware of the door's existence. And even when we look at Pomni's placement at the dinner table right at the end of episode 1, she is placed at the center, the same exact place that Jesus was at the Last Supper, meaning that Pomni is probably the only one that's going to understand the truth about the digital circus. Even if we look at all of the episodes after the very first theory, she's seemingly the only person to understand each one of the characters in their totality. And she, unlike everybody else, has a deeper understanding of almost everyone in the circus. But it's very possible that after understanding the whole truth of the circus, she will never ever be able to return and help those that she needs to save. Now then, this next theory is about how Caine and Bubble actually share the same consciousness, and that he created this double consciousness in order to stay sane. Now, Caine has always been a wild character, zany, crazy, but nonetheless a little suspicious. Even when Pomni first meets him, he deliberately ignores the fact that she asked for an exit, choosing to carry on with the adventure that he already had planned. But in episode 3, during the therapy session, he kinda kirks out, especially when his whole reality begins to crumble. And then you have what happens during the Five Nights at Spudsy's episode. It's at the point where Zubul points out that they've always had a suggestion box, which Caine rips out the wall, to which Caine asks Bubble to plug it up, and Bubble does so by using its tongue. But while Caine is explaining the adventure that they're going to have, Bubble stops sticking out their tongue, and Caine sticks out his tongue, almost like their consciousnesses are linked. And while this could be a gag that was set up earlier in the episode with Caine sticking out his tongue for no apparent reason, this isn't the only time that we see Caine show no control when Bubble is around. For example, there's many times where Caine chooses to speak, but he can't speak when Bubble is speaking. And it's not like Caine is being polite, it's like he actually can't speak while Bubble is speaking. And we also see that whenever everybody else is on an adventure, it's just Caine and Bubble off doing some random thing. And this is because Caine actually can't stay sane without Bubble. Because in the Zubul therapy session, if we notice very closely, Bubble is nowhere to be found. And during this whole conversation where Zubul and Caine are working things out, it's hard for Caine to maintain his composure. And when we flip back to the adventure and then come back, guess who's in frame keeping composure with Caine? Bubble. And Bubble wasn't in the scene prior. Basically, Caine is splitting his personality into two people so that way he can stay sane. And we can tell that Caine has some not so good intentions every so often, especially with his outbursts when he tries to threaten Zubul, or when he melts down when Bubble's not there. And with the inclusion of episode 6 at the very end of the award show, Caine is by himself looking at the results of the award show. And upon looking at it, he kirks out and goes crazy again. But guess who's not in frame? Guess who's not in shot? Guess who's not anywhere to be found? That is Bubble. Have you always wondered when each character basically entered the Amazing Digital Circus? Well, this next theory kind of tackles that. Because what if I told you that Pomni directly told us when everybody entered the Amazing Digital Circus in episode 5? Now, episode 5 was one of the wildest episodes to happen in the Amazing Digital Circus, diving deep into Ragatha's backstory, showing us that Pomni is a little bit more complex than we thought, even tapping into the interest of other characters like Jax and Gangle. But we also find out that Pomni was a little edgy. See, in episode 5, during the bar skit scene, Pomni basically reveals to us that she used to go urban diving, or in other words, urbexing, where people would go around and explore abandoned warehouses and buildings just for fun. But the thing is that Zubul told us that they did it too, but they obviously didn't enter the circus at the same time. In fact, they entered at 2 separate times. Well, urbexing or urban exploring was pretty popular in the early 2000s. People used to do this for fun and post their findings online for everybody to see in the early days of the internet. But when Pomni tells everybody that she did this, Jax assumes that she was a YouTuber, but Pomni says that she did this for fun. But this tells us that Jax also knows about YouTube, which didn't exist in the early 2000s. But if you look at the trends for urbexing, it was not only popular during the early 2000s, but it was also popular in about 2016 onward. And the popularity since 2016 has only skyrocketed since then. Knowing this, Pomni entering the circus last makes more sense, because if she was doing this recently, then it would also be popular around 2016 onward. And also in that same episode, Jax and Zubul basically reveal when they might have entered the circus. Because when Jax was asked about his backstory, he starts to ramble on about a Breaking Bad reference. And mind you, Breaking Bad didn't come out until 2008. And Zubul knowing this reference as well means that they didn't enter the circus until after 2008 as well. But this also means that Jax and Ragatha probably didn't enter in until 2010 to 2012. This is because Gangle knows a lot about anime. Jax and Ragatha knowing about anime boils down to one simple reason: Toonami, a programming block for Cartoon Network that was canceled in 2008 but was brought back in 2012, meaning that Zubul came in around 2008, Jax, Ragatha, and Gangle came in around 2010 to 2012, whereas Pomni came in right after that in 2016, and because of Kinger's episode, we know for a fact that he was there since the very beginning around the 1990s. Now let's talk about how everybody is wrong about Jax. And it's because people think that the reason why he acts the way he does is because of this other character named Ribbit. Now then, Jax has been notoriously known as a chaotic neutral character who has always done things for the sake of doing it because he thinks it's fun. But one thing that many fans have noticed is that he has a hang-up about certain characters, specifically past friendships. In episode 5, we kept on getting hints that this other character is going to be super important, that being Ribbit, somebody that used to be Jax's friend. But with this character, a lot of people believe that Jax has betrayed this character, when in fact, I believe that this character betrayed Jax. Because in episode 6, Jax and Pomni have Zubul cornered, and after finding their way out of the corner, Jax is left behind, to where we see him stare off at a couple of doors. The first door he looks at is an NPC door which hasn't been marked off yet, to where his eyes meet Kaufmo's door. And when he does look at Kaufmo's door, he seems upset at himself. But he doesn't give that same look to Ribbit's door. Instead, we get a look that seems like a look of fear. How is this a look of fear? Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that Jax's mannerisms are based off of a cat. For one, being a bunny character, his eyes look more like a cat's and function similar to a cat's with the dilation and everything. But that should alarm you, because cat's eyes mean different things. Specifically, in that moment, Jax's eyes resembled that of danger. This means whenever he looks at Ribbit's door, he feels fear, which is weird because he doesn't have that same reaction with Kaufmo. He was never scared of Kaufmo. That's why when he fights with Pomni, he says you don't even know the people that they were before they came to the circus. And because he lost a good friend and was rejected by another, he rejects everybody. But let me ask you a simple question. Why couldn't Pomni give it over the fact that Jax said he was the funny one? Because the answer is he's not. He's actually lying to himself. See, in episode 6, Caine devises a new adventure where they basically have a trust game, which ends up turning into Call of Duty. And before they can start the game, Pomni and Jax get paired up. But the weird thing is that Pomni and Jax have a weird conversation about archetypes. Now, during this conversation, Jax basically tells Pomni his view of the digital world, that nothing is real, they're all cartoon characters, and everybody falls into an archetype. Now then, the thing about archetypes is that they're very specific character roles that we see throughout all of time. One of the most famous is the straight man and his dumb best friend. The straight man usually wants to follow all of the rules, and then the dumb best friend basically breaks them, and that's what causes the dynamic between the two. Now, there are more archetypes that Jax didn't explain, but he basically names them all. But the one Pomni can't get over is the fact that he said that he is the funny one, and for real, he isn't. The original funny archetype was Kaufmo. So why is Jax lying? Matter of fact, if we go back to the very first episode where we seen him extract, all over his room is written the word exit, but on his bedpost is a joke that says, "What did the exit say?" and the joke is not finished. This means for some strange reason, Jax is actually taking the archetype of Kaufmo for himself, which is not too far-fetched considering that he viewed Kaufmo as a friend. But is it possible he's getting all of the evil traits from Ribbit? But the question is Jax even evil? Ragatha sure thinks so. But the thing is, she was wrong about Jax as well. One of the most important parts to episode 6 is when Ragatha calls out Jax. But the thing is, she was wrong. It's in this moment where she finally confronts Jax about how she truly feels. She stands up for herself because she thinks that Jax is doing something evil. But the funny thing is that Jax doesn't know what she's talking about. The moment that Jax breaks character and literally has a questioning look on his face is because he doesn't know what she's talking about. The whole time that she's known Jax, she's believed that he's this character that is being evil for the sake of making people abstract. And if we go all the way back to episode 1 when she's describing what abstraction is and what it feels like, she's probably gotten to that point many times. Because to quote her slightly in episode 1, she says it's usually when you get to your breaking point that things start to get weird and you lose your mind. Then straight after that, abstracted Kaufmo literally glitches her out. So she knows the pain of abstraction and how it has affected her multiple times. Jax is seemingly the only person that pushes her all the way to that point, because we see it happen in episode 5 during the baseball skit. But this moment also proves that Jax doesn't have an ulterior motive, because like he said, he doesn't really care about anything that goes on in the circus. He just wants to do whatever he wants. And that means that Ragatha has been holding this mission in her head to save everybody from this evil person. And she's the only one that can do it, but she never had to. And that's why the conversation with Kinger was so important. Speaking of Ragatha, we should talk about how Kinger is actually her father. And episode 3 tells us this, as well as some other episodes. In episode 3, Pomni and Kinger both get separated in a whole nother adventure, and they basically unravel the story of the man who killed the angel. And the thing about it is is that Kinger is the one that finds all these tapes and wants to listen to it thoroughly. There's one line that I think everybody should pay attention to. He says that his paranoia drove him to the point where he could no longer be the protector of his wife and his theoretical kids, which makes the scene where Ragatha and Kinger are in the loser corner make more sense. Because when Ragatha is lamenting about her not even able to do anything, Kinger consoles her. He says that one of his best moments of being in the circus is when Ragatha came there. He said it was like light coming back into his life. And this isn't the only time he mentions it. He actually brings it up in episode 2, pretty early on in the series, where he says he remembers the first time that she came and how long it took for her to adjust. And again, in this moment, consoles her. And there's only one thing that we know about Kinger's wife, and that's the fact that she abstracted. But what if the reason why she abstracted was because she couldn't have kids? Which is why the man in the tape says that he had theoretical kids, like they were supposed to happen. Something that's probably not possible within the circus. But because Kinger and Queenie couldn't have a daughter, Queenie abstracted, leaving Kinger to blame himself for not being able to give his wife what she needed. But Ragatha coming into the picture and Kinger being able to guide her was his way of becoming a father. But speaking of this, got me thinking of one popular theory that there might be an imposter among the cast of the Digital Circus. But I think that the one that is most likely that person is actually Gangle. Now, we all know Gangle to be this misunderstood, sad character who doesn't always get to shine. She's often bullied by Jax and breaks her comedy mask quite often. While it seems like Zooble is her only pal, there's a couple things that stick out about Gangle's character. While this theory has a little bit less evidence than most of my other ones, I think it's worth checking out because Gangle might be an imposter. Evidence number 1 comes from the Five Nights at Spudsy's episode, where Ragatha gets stupid sauce inside of her eye, and then she sees this about Gangle, who's standing directly in front of her. Now, if stupid sauce is supposed to act like a real world substance that allows you to see things for what they truly are, like Ragatha does, then maybe we're seeing the true side of Gangle. Because the last time we seen this face was in episode 3, which happened to be the same face that possessed Pomni, which I theorized to be Kaufmo. But what makes this theory more possible is that in episode 5, during the Big Tops versus the evil Big Tops, Gangle doesn't have an evil side, and everybody else does besides her. She even asked, why don't I have an evil side? If you look at the personalities of all of the evil sides, they're mostly their shadow personalities, the part that they either hide from everybody, they don't expound upon, or that things that nobody knows about, with the exception of Zooble, of course. So what if Gangle is already evil, but she doesn't know it yet? And that the reason why she doesn't have an evil side is because Kaufmo has already possessed her. But the final thing that we must talk about before we end this video is what happens when Jax holds his breath? I think we actually have an answer now. He abstracts. I went back and rewatched all of the episodes of the Amazing Digital Circus where I landed on this clip on episode 3. Jax and the gang are standing around holding their breath and telling us what happens when each character does so. Kinger glows, Ragatha's hair strands stand up, Gangle's mask turns upside down, and Zooble's limbs straighten out. But nobody knows exactly what Jax does because he doesn't want to show anybody. But he points at the viewer and says, what about you? What do you think happens? But now I think it makes total sense. Now in episode 6, we possibly got an answer for what happens when Jax holds his breath. And we're left with 2 possibilities. After Jax and Pomni fight each other after she calls him a coward, he sits alone. He gets visibly upset to where he has to leave to the restroom. And when he does, he's leaning over the sink hyperventilating. Now in this moment, he's having a panic attack, and hyperventilation is a symptom of that, where it feels like you can't breathe, so you take short, quick breaths. But by doing that, you actually make it so that you can't breathe. So if Jax holds his breath, would he actually abstract? But there's actually one other moment inside of episode 6 that might be another answer as well. And that answer is that he makes this face, which is less likely because he's only choked for like half a second by Pomni. Whereas in this moment, he can't catch his breath. He doesn't have it. But what do you think? And is any of that a coincidence? I think not. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hype this video if it's already out, and of course, check out all of the other videos on the page. We got many theories, and this is just a part of it. And I'll of course see you in another video. Bye-bye. I always thought it was weird that Mr. Krabs treated his secret recipe with the utmost secrecy. But there's many times where we get to see the recipe, but it's in gibberish or nonsense, and that's on purpose. And that's because the secret Krabby Patty formula doesn't actually exist, and he only keeps the bottle as a means to keep his Krabby empire on top.